So welcome to Sunday. Today I'm going to be just quilting and pinning all my quilts. So step one, whenever I have a quilting day, I clean up the area around me. So that's what I'm doing now, is I'm just straightening up all of my stuff. Second thing I do is I lay all of my quilts out, which I've already done here. I have them in categories. These are gift quilts. These are pixelated quilts for the new quilt patterns that you saw me make last week. And then these are all of my panel quilts. So depending upon the quilt, depends upon the color thread I use, what I may do, things like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is the pixelated quilts. So after I have them organized, I grab a quilt. So this is the Wonder Woman quilt. So next I'm going to decide what color thread I'm going to use. And of course I do this for each of the quilts that I make. So for Wonder Woman, what color do I want? I'm gonna just go in off-white, I think. So my regular off-white thread is fine. What color do I want to, oh, you know what would look good on Wonder Woman? Is a nice silver. I think I'm going to go silver. So I'm going to use 156 for the masterpiece threads, for the superior threads. Yeah, I like the way that looks. Okay, so gray it is. So that means I need some gray bobbin thread. So let me get some gray bobbing thread. Got that. Here we are. And scissors. So if you've just joined me, today I'm going to be quilting and binding the entire day on and off. Step one of quilting and binding, I've got all of my quilts organized in the back. Step two, I figured out my color, so Wonder Woman has got a light gray. And now I'm going to prepare to start quilting. So, set it up, got there. And if you've seen the streams in the past, I do like to use this machine to wind my bobbins, because the other machine you actually have to press down the foot pedal in order to wind them. Alright, so I've got a small thing of thread here, so I'm going to use this to secure the outer border. And then once this is gone, I'll start using the thread I've got for my bobbins that I'm winding right now. Oops, didn't quite thread. There it goes. There we are. Oh, you know what? I forgot to update my social media, so let me do that. And I just realized I didn't change my description. So, I got that. I apologize for dead air. I'm almost done. There we are. Okay, so everyone has been notified. All right, so back to winding bobbins. I have a case that I keep all of my bobbins in for piecing and for quilting. So I'm just gonna keep winding until I run out. Oh, there it is. All right. I'm not going to use my gloves yet, so let me set them aside. So whenever I do regular quilting, I tend to do a meander, just a plain stipple, and I meander about. So I've noticed whenever I meander that it's actually a lot better for me if I secure the outer borders and I secure the outer edges. Oops, I just realized I didn't change my foot yet. I literally sat down and I wanted to show you the entire process from start to finish. Okay, I'm going to do another one. Okay, so I have to change my foot. I don't want a piecing foot. The foot that I prefer when I do my quilting, I cannot find. Did it slide under my machine someplace? No. I bet I put it away because I haven't actually quilted in a while. I just used my walking foot. There it is. I did put it away. Okay, so the foot that I like to use for my quilting is this C foot. It has just a circle in the center. I find it's easier for me to see exactly what I'm doing and where I'm quilting. So let me tighten that back on there. And then on my machine, I have a setting right there that I use for quilting. The tension's a little bit higher because I'm moving all around. I like the higher tension. My width is a little bit higher, and my needle is perfectly centered upon this foot. All right, I'm gonna keep winding. Alright, so that's winding. Now, let me go ahead and secure. Oops, we drop my feed dogs. There we go. And secure the out. Now, I don't like to actually quilt while I'm running the bobbins, while I'm making all the bobbin threads. So this is just an easy thing I can do while it's running. Now, if you're quilting regular lines, you don't want to secure the outer edges. This is only for the meandering stippling method. I have just found for me, it's easier because I tend to catch some of this back fabric in my sewing, and this prevents that. you may have noticed I'm throwing all my thread in here. This is just a little gypsy quilter pop-up handy little basket that I like to take with me and use as my mini trash can. And then when it gets full, I'll empty it. And the reason, again, why I pre-wind all of my bobbins is, oh, hey Doug, how are you? So the reason why I pre-wind all my bobbins is as I'm quilting, it just makes it for faster going. I can actually just keep moving and moving and moving. And especially whenever I'm quilting, I don't like to stop and do something in the middle of the quilting. Okay, that one's good. And I've just got a little bit left on there I'll use later. Alright, I am set up. So, whenever you quilt, the first thing you want to do is make sure that your machine is at a level to where your arms are at a 90-degree angle. So you notice how as I sit right here, my chair is this perfect height like this. This is the Arrow sewing chair that I got with the set of everything. The nice thing about this chair, even though it's not adjustable for me, it gives me that perfect sewing height. On my my quilt club machine, I actually also have an extended table. It gives me a nice wide sewing range. The sewing desk itself is nice and wide. I've got the extended leaf on there, and I have it placed perfectly. So while I'm quilting, my quilt doesn't fall off the edges. So that's the setup. So I have all my setup ready to go. I have a nice pair of quilting gloves, and I love these things. Jenny Lyons is the one that recommended these. They are the Wonder Grip. They have a nice sticky grip. So as I'm touching the quilts, notice how my hand isn't moving at all. So it gives me a nice grip on the actual quilt. So my hands don't slip, and so my stitches go exactly where I want them to go. And while I'm quilting, I try to stand up, stretch, take a break between each quilt, because staying in this position for a long period of time is going to be bad on your shoulders, it's going to be bad on your back. So while you're quilting, try to take your shoulders, put them back, you know, sit straight. It'll be better for your back. But then also try to relax. So if you relax, then you're not tensing any of this up. Alright, so let's get quilting. So again, this is the Wonder Woman quilt, and I've chosen a silver thread. And I am just going to meander. And I'm going to start up in the corner. Now, these stitches I made to secure the outsides, you're not going to see them. They're going to be underneath the bindings. There we are. I just wanted to put it into place. Now, before I go any farther, I'm going to check those first couple of stitches, make sure that my thread is even on the bottom and the top, and it is. So I'm going to make sure that my tension is correct before I move on. So if you ever purchase any of my quilts, you may look in the upper right hand corner and you'll see a little bit of stitching, and then you'll may see a pause before it continues on. That's what I'm doing. All right, so let's quilt this thing. Now while I meander and move, I just like to have the nice flowy circular puzzle piece look. So I don't want to go back and touch any of my other threads. So I'm not going to overlap my thread. But at the same time, I want to make sure that there's a good distance between them. To keep the same amount of distance between all of my stitching. Because even though I'm meandering and I'm just kind of moving all around, it gives it a nice uniform look. Alright, I'm just going to double check, make sure my sound is still good, and it is. Alright, now as you notice, her eyes are right here. As I get close to the eyes, I'm not going to sew over top of the eyes. It's just a little thing that I learned through the years. Whenever I would sew through the eyes, even though meandering is, don't pay attention to the actual quilt, just move all over, it would look like maybe her eye was closed, or she was kind of, you know, it would affect the expression of the quilt. And so I've learned not to sew over eyes, not to sew through faces if the face is really small, but in her case, face is big, so I can go through the face, just not through the eyes. As I was quilting, the quilt shifted. So I do want to stop periodically, check my gloves, and make sure that the quilt is exactly where I want it. Shift her, and if you've just joined me, today is quilting and binding day. notice as I'm quilting, I'm trying to move at the same speed throughout the entire quilt. This isn't just to be careful, this is to make sure that my stitches are all uniform and they're the same length throughout the entire quilt. Because I have my feed dogs down, I control what the quilt looks like, I control the stitch length, and I control all of that with how fast I move. So if I want a long stitch length, I'll move faster. If I want a short stitch length, I would move slower. Now, as I'm getting this far, I want to check my bobbin thread. Nope, I'm still good. So I don't have an alert set on this machine that tells me when the bobbin thread gets low. I have one set on my my embroidery machine. That way I don't run out. But this one, I've got to keep an eye on it as I work. And winter one is quilted. Now I am almost out of bobbin thread, so before I take a small break, I'm going to go on to the next quilt that I'm going to use the silver for, just to use up that bobbin thread. And I think I'm going to go silver on black mage. So I'm just working on the border. Let's make sure I don't have the fabric caught. No. this case, I don't care if it runs out. Whoops. There we go. I caught the edge of the fabric. As I was saying, I don't care if the bobbin runs out in this case, which it just did, because I'm not in the middle of my actual quilting. Oops. Thought I dropped you off. Okay, and then now I have an empty bobbin. And let me put the rest of this bobbin in. That's the only problem with thread, is it's hard to get it off these gloves because they are super sticky. And it's out. See, again, you're not going to see any of these stitches that I've got around the border because the binding's going to cover it. Okay, now I am going to do Black Mage next with silver. So let me put another silver in the bobbin. Now, remember I said I had to take breaks. If I just sat and quilted non-stop, my shoulders would get very stiff, my back would start to hurt. So it's super important that you take breaks. There are quilters that I know that will go for an hour before they stand up and take a break. There's some that will put a CD in, or some that'll have the radio on every time a commercial comes on. They'll take a break. So as long as you set yourself some goals and you follow it and you take breaks when you plan on, you can go for a while. All right, so I'm going to get my pins. I don't know where I put, oh, I put them down there. I put them away. Surprise, surprise. So what I'm gonna do while I'm taking a break is I wanna stand, stretch my legs, and I'm gonna take all the pins out of Wonder Woman. And then I'm gonna trim the borders. So I'll actually trim it around, and then I'll be ready to quilt the next one. And this is literally what I will be doing the entire day. Once all of these quilts are quilted, I will take a break, come back, and start binding them all. And you notice as I take the pins out, I leave them open in my little container. By leaving them open, it actually allows me to pin them faster. So when I'm setting myself up over at the Family Center, and I'm sandwiching them and putting them together, I just grab a handful of open pins. And if you didn't see the pins Friday when I was putting Wonder Woman back together, these are special pins. So they're curved on the bottom. So they're quilting pins designed as you pin things together to scoop under and catch all the layers. Now the Wonder Woman and the Black Mage quilt, I'm going to be bringing with me along with TARDIS, Superman, Totoro, Kirby, and Pac-Man. All the ones that I have patterns for so far. I'm going to be bringing them with me to Vegas this week. So if you're in the Vegas area, if you don't own a sewing store and going to the SDTA. You can always contact me if you want to see any of the quilts. I'd be more than happy to show you. And if you do own a sewing store or know someone that does, make sure they sign up for our seminar next Monday morning. We're going to be talking to sewing stores about why they want to carry cosplay supplies. Because cosplayers are looking for places to buy these things. And a lot of times they can't find them and they have to get them online. Well, as a cosplayer, you want to touch it, you want to feel it, you want to see the texture, you may have questions on how to use it. In that case, seeing it in person is so much better. Alright, so now I'm trimming it. So all I'm doing is I'm following along my fabric. You notice how as I sewed and ironed, the fabric kind of went a little wonky. So I'm just going to straighten that out a little bit as I trim off the edges. Now this is also the time to where if I made a mistake and I sewed any of this black fabric into the quilting, this is where I discover that I've made that mistake. And I've done that a few times too. And that's one of the reasons why for my meandering, I sew along the borders and edges to secure it down to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't know of anyone else that as they're quilting, we do that first. But like I said, it's just something that I do because I know the mistakes that I make and I want to make sure that I do not make them. Yeah, Doug, doesn't that piece look so much better how it's correctly put on there? If you didn't see my video on Friday, I discovered that this piece was upside down when I was pinning this quilt. So I had to fix it. So on Friday I fixed it and then I worked on the dog quilt that I'm making for my husband. Now you notice here, as I cut it, I cut away some of that stitching. That is perfectly fine because the binding is going to cover it. Like I said, most quilters don't even sew down the edges. So in that case, you would have an open seam there, but the binding's going to cover it. There we go. All right. So Wonder Woman is all done and she is ready for her binding. But again, I like to do everything all at the same time for efficiency because I don't want to constantly change the settings of my machine, change the needles out, any of that stuff. So Wonder Woman's now done. It's time for Black Mage. Alright, so first thing I need to do is finish securing my outer edges. I didn't close these pins. I'm going to close them now. When I first learned how to quilt, and I was learning efficient ways of doing things, I thought to myself, why close those pins? It's more efficient to just keep them over, or keep them open, and then as soon as you finish quilting, you can pull them all out. Saves you 2 different steps. Yeah, that doesn't quite work. I did that, I think, for one quilt. I was constantly getting stuck by the pins. At one point, I think I was bleeding a little bit. And then it's a lot, you have a higher chance of hitting the pin if it's open. And you don't want to hit these pins. Don't run over the safety pins, just the straight pins. There we go. Now, I don't have to stop and take this out because this is a full bobbin that I'm working with. So, before I do the actual quilting, let me fix my gloves. Correct posture. There we go. Did my things freeze? No, okay. Sorry. I thought my cameras froze for a second. And I just did something by accident because I wasn't thinking. I sewed through his eye. It's not the end of the world. I'm not going to undo it. But like I said before, it's something that I try to avoid. And whenever I finish and hold him up, you'll see what I mean, how it looks a little weird when I sew it through his eye. And now I have to decide, do I want to sew through the other eye for symmetry, or leave it alone? And leave it alone. Whenever I'm quilting, I always have to make sure my hair is up and out of the way, or else sometimes to make it caught in the thread, and then I have my hair sewn into the quilts. Because I'm moving a lot on a faster rate. I don't want my hair caught in the quilts. You don't want my hair in your quilt. I sewed through his eye. Okay, so it's symmetric now. bobbin thread. Yep, so good. Bobbin thread. I've got to keep an eye on it. I do not like running out of bobbin thread in the middle of the quilt. So every time I get near the edge, I'm going to look at it. Make the whole thing. Fantastic. That's it. And Black Mage is done. So, now I need to decide if I'm going to use silver for any of these. You know what? I can probably use silver for both of those. No, I should use a cream for these two. Okay, alright, so I'm done with silver for now. So I'm just going to remove this, set it over here. Okay, now, time for my stretching break. So I will take care of removing pins from Black Mage and trimming him up. Also, if you didn't see my Quiltoni page yesterday for my social media, I am the contact point for the quilted prayer rugs. It is a initiative that Generation Q magazine is doing, where we are going to be making quilted prayer rugs and distributing them to mosques. There's a set of women that's going to be making them and sending them to the mosque in Quebec that had the terrorist shooting. There are others that are going to be sending the ones that's the mosque in Texas that was burned. And I am currently the contact point for Ontario. So if you want to spread the word, those people that are in Ontario can make and send them to me, and I will get them distributed. I'm in the process of contacting mosques and places that would want to take all of the donations. So as I get more information for where the quilts are going to go that I'm collecting, I will make sure that I post it on my social media and of course talk about it in Twitch. I've decided for the ones that I'm making, I'm going to be doing rainbow ones. Because you have to stay away from imagery. There can't be any images of people, animals, anything that could seem sacrilegious because you're kneeling and laying on it. They like geometric designs. They like lots of color. So I'm going to do rainbow ones because of all my rainbow quilts for charity. Because to me, a rainbow symbolizes love and acceptance. Oops, there it is. All right. Trim that. And again, in some cases, I'm cutting the actual fabric. In other cases, I'm skimming the edge of it. My goal is to even out the edges while trimming off the excess so it's ready for binding. And this is what I do a lot too. I make a bunch of quilts and I have a single day that I quilt and bind them all. Yep. And black Mage is quilted.